let's switch to doing a fireside chat. You covered a lot of awesome content and advice. I appreciate it. And it's funny, like you've kind of summed it up in your tweets. So like I meant what I said, that each of those tweets is like a nugget of wisdom.
Yeah, when I was making the talk, I was like, hey, I've tweeted about this stuff. Let's just go a little deeper.
I've written this before. All right, cool. So one thing I thought, and this is a broad question, but like, what are some of the top mistakes you see product teams make? If we look at it from a mistakes lens, like what are some of the top mistakes you see product teams make that prevent them from iterating to product market fit?
They think that building product is a prioritization problem. I would argue more it's a sequencing problem. And that's more of a product strategy mindset than a tactical mindset. So prioritization is tactical. It's like, hey, I have this list of items, I got some columns and I'm going to score it, right? Sequencing is strategic. And that really is about like more like Amazon calls it working backward. But it's the idea that like, you know your end goal. And what you're trying to do then, in our case, the way we think about it is we know the end goal. And that's a very Amazonian, whatever type of thing to think of. Mm-hmm. And they've written a lot about it now. And, I think people are still confused by it because it's one of those things where if you worked at Amazon and did it well, you would know it. And if you worked at Amazon and didn't do it quite as well, you might not know how it works, right? But it's just in the weeds. But basically, we know where we want to get to. And then we think about like, the step before that, the step before that, the step before that. That's how Amazon basically says they do it. And then they get to what we call as step one. And so what we're trying to do is figure out what's the right step one that gets us everything we want. And everything we want isn't just like product usage and stuff. It's like a product that when I demo it, like I just did, people are like, oh, I need that.
Right.
That's all we're looking for.
Right.
Oh, right. I need that. Right. So like if you could build a product where it can be demoed like that and you have a product experience that's unique and you can find all those points, just demo super well. And what is that step one? So we could demo our product without any of the actions features really well because of that infinite scroll and just how performant it is, even at scale. And when someone, even a big enterprise, when they come to us, they're like, they don't even say, can you handle our scale? But because by that time, I'm telling them the story about, hey, we've got customers with 13 million documents, it's just as fast. Right? So you're trying to find that step one. So I think that like the biggest mistake is like they just prioritize instead of thinking through the product strategy of where do we start for everything where we want to get to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's awesome. And that's great. Yeah. And that also makes me think, so that you mentioned something again in passing super fast, which is say why. It's really important to know why. The longer I work in product, the more I think why is the most important question, right? And so there's a lot of whys to figure out from the end goal to what the right step one is, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're constantly trying to essentially assess whether you're doing the right thing. And the best way to assess that is any why question. Why does the customer want it? Why is an infinite scroll so important? Like you're trying to justify these decisions because that'll help you find the best ones.
Right. Ooh, okay. And then, one thing I was going to ask you about is how market segmentation impacts product market fit. And you dropped the term ICP. For people that aren't familiar with it, maybe it's the same question or same answers. Could you define what it is and how you determine it?
Yeah, it's your ideal customer profile. So you look it up on the internet and there'll be like all kinds of things about what ideal customer profile is. Some people will tell you even things like you have to be customer obsessed and you should know what your customer is eating for breakfast and all this other good stuff, which is cool, right? Like if that's important for your business because it's a B2C business or even in a B2B business, somehow they're like opening their phone and you want them to open your app or whatever while they're eating breakfast or whatever. Sure, maybe it matters what they're eating for breakfast so that they can actually use your the phone while they're eating. I don't know, but like the funniest one about the ICP is like I think it's in Instagram, which is like a bus stop and a toilet seat product, right? And that's an ICP concept, right? In my mind, it's like, oh well, ideal customer is going to open it while they're sitting there doing their thing, and like. Yeah, people open Twitter, people open Instagram, people open Facebook at those times. I happen to open my email at most of those times. Just kidding. But I think at the end of the day, like this market thing that we call market is just like there's big markets everywhere. Almost every market's pretty big. I think the big thing is like, have you found a product to fit in a market? Okay, cool. Right. But what is a market? A market is a set of customers, and that's why the ICP is the game. In my opinion, especially when you're very B2B. When you're B2C, I think like, and I have lots of opinions about jobs to be done, but like, and I should not share them, but like, I really love this idea that like customers are going to be doing tasks and you're just trying to map to those tasks. And when you can get to that and you can make those tasks happen faster than any other tool or alternative, you're in the money. And that applies to B2C and B2B. And that's a Tony Ulwick, who I know people were mentioning in the chat earlier. I'm a big fan when you get down to the brass knuckle tactics of like product interactions, right?
Agreed. Tony's spoken at least twice at the meetup.
Amazing.
I'm a big fan.
Amazing.
So when you, we can talk a little bit about jobs to be done real fast. The thing about jobs to be done is there's not like just one version. There's different flavors and iterations out there, right? And the thing I will say, based on what you said, I like Tony's the best because it's the most specific and gets down to brass tacks, I think. So
I think Tony's, if you ever wondered, like, if you ever wanted a framework for doing what we did with Nira and finding like this like speed to the task and things like that, and you cared about that, or your product, it mattered for your product. It's not all products that's important. Tony's framework is the best. We didn't use it explicitly, but I know a lot of people like frameworks, and if we needed to on our team, we would have done that. Like that's the one I would have went to, like, how do they do it? Like, how does he say it? How do I need to explain it? If I had a larger team, we would probably use his framework. So it's not me like waving my hands around saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, or whatever the heck happens. Marie doesn't wave her hands around like that. She usually writes stuff up. I usually wave my hands around like that. But like, yeah, I think my big thing about jobs to be done is I don't like calling things jobs. I just refuse to do that.
I'm with you.
The one thing I love though, that I always like to share is like, I love the switch method and the interviewing and surveying strategy they use. Well, interviewing really, which is trying to figure out why someone switched from one product to another, whether it's from another product to yours or alternatives to yours or the other way around, right? That's definitely a meaningful framework and a meaningful set of interviewing that we do. And I will share a link as we talk to something we wrote on the topic that I'm just like, I just love sharing because I think it's really good.
Nice. Yeah, I think, I don't feel as strongly about the word job. I don't prefer it though. For me, people, a lot of times in the product world, people use terms and they like, because it's a different word, people assume it means something different. So for me, I've always said like a customer need, a customer problem, a customer benefit, a want, a desire, a pain point. It's all the same freaking thing. If you want to call it a job, great. But like, so the only reason I think that they did job is to get people to think in that side is the whole problem space or solution space, and I think that what Tony said is so many people, what a need means is just people don't agree on what it means. So I think that's why they invented a new word, so that was kind of why they did it. But,
I'm a marketer at heart. And like, I just hate when words can be easily misconstrued, confused, and they picked a confusing one that made it more confusing than the needs. And my big thing about jobs to be done is simple. There is a ton of value in the tactics. There's a ton of value in the strategies.
Sure.
But I've never seen a company implement jobs to be done with the word jobs and become successful with that internally. And so I think customer benefit, customer needs, and things like that, and defining that is important, because when you think of a job, you think of something completely different. And think of it this way. This is a really dumb one. I'm going to move on from this, I promise. But like, I told you not to do this, or I hinted at least. But Dan, this is the throwdown. Everyone that works at a company has a job at the company. So when they hear job, they don't hear something that you want to associate with customers, in my opinion.
Right. Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Well, so it's good to know we're both fans of Tony's work. So what I want to also, you have little nuggets in there. Like micro nuggets you drop, and we didn't get them. One is, I really like the phrase underserved market opportunities. I wish more people, and it's specifically the word underserved. Like that is one of my keywords. I said it in the chat, and I love that. And that's where the one thing, just to share for a sec, part of why I'm such a fan of Tony's work is, when I was at Intuit trying to identify how do we figure out what's underserved versus well-served, I developed a framework, importance versus satisfaction. A few years later, Tony published his book. I happened to discover it, and lo and behold, he had importance versus satisfaction. So I'm like, no way, somebody else trying to do this, trying to figure out how to create customer value came up with the same way. So I love that thing. And I think that's the number one thing is people don't focus on problems. And they don't ask the question, well, how well served, how big a problem is it? I guess it's just to simplify, forget the terminology. How big a problem is this? And I think what I love about your definition of pivoting is you're switching to a bigger problem, like a more important problem that's going to be a bigger deal. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you go deeper, double click on underserved, market opportunities, like how do you assess the level of how it's served or not? And how do you think about that?
I'm a product person. I like watching how people use products. That's it. Like that's probably the simplest thing I can say, because like then you can figure out where the frustrations are, and it's your job to figure out which ones are painful and worth solving. There's no science to this that I can say, hey, there's a science here. Because sometimes you'll watch someone use a product and like you can't really find meaningful problems. You can maybe make a 20% better product, but you can't make a 10x better product, right? So like that's what I'm looking for. Where's my 10x? Like, can I find an opportunity where I can build a 10x better experience? Because then I know at least I'm ahead for a second, right? And that's kind of the escape velocity, almost like the rocket fuel you need. And if you don't have any of it in the tank when you start, oh man, like it's harder to start. I don't want to make it so hard on myself, to be honest.
Got it. And it sounds like, just to close the loop, that's what you saw with Nira, when these security people, you saw they're basically like using these basic tools and banging rocks together. And therefore that's where you saw the huge opportunity, it sounds like.
Yeah. And for us, it was IT people. Because here's the funny thing. In an org, the legal team, the security team, HR team goes to IT and says, yo, what's up? We need this done. And IT's like, oh, okay. And then they go to their scripting and command line tooling, and they spend 20, literally we've estimated this and seen it, 25% of their day when they need to do just one of these tasks. That idea of like pick, select, whatever. And they don't even get to do the find problems part ever. They're all about like, oh, HR said this person and this person needs to be put on this kind of hold or this kind of thing or whatever. Then IT's stuck essentially having to do it with whatever tools are accessible to them. And the tools are just inadequate. Right.
Because they were never designed to solve that problem. Yeah. Got it. Okay. And then the other term I like you use a lot too, and as you were telling the story, I was like, let's see, is the wedge, right? Is start with a small wedge, basically, right? And I see a lot of companies trying to go too wide too early. And probably one of the best articulations of that I've heard is Peter Thiel in his book, 0 to 1. He makes the case that many companies that eventually got big, they all started with a very specific wedge. So I'm just wondering if you could share more about how to make sure you're like picking a good wedge, or you're identifying a wedge, not trying to go too broad too early.
Totally misunderstood concept. It's back to like, I think my step one strategy is the clearest way I can explain it, which is like, look, Instagram wanted to get in the collections game. Their wedge was like a button. That's it. That did barely anything. And then they were able to build the next thing once they earned the right. I call it earning the right. So the way they earned the right is by getting a high percentage of those Instagrammers doing that. Like for us, we believe what we're building today is a wedge. It's a wedge because what exists today that are alternatives, we are 10x better than those alternatives. And so if we have that, then we earn the right to get the attention of these customers. We earn the right to get the sales.
I see.
And then we earn the right to build the next thing, right, on top of this. And if it's a good wedge, you can build a lot on top of it. So for example, I showed you the documents view. We could have been done there. We built the people view. We built the domain view so you can see all the external domains and all that data. Think about how many more things we can do with that same paradigm. This is a true product wedge, because you can put more things, more data in that paradigm and let people manage within that. So for us, that's how we thought of the wedge, which is, I really love the product wedges better because then it aligns with product strategy. There's other kinds of wedges, but in this context, the product wedges are about really narrowing down and saying, hey, where do we start and how does it get us where we want to go?
Got it. Okay. Well, it sounds like it's identifying that small initial set of functionality. It kind of goes back to what you were just talking about with Amazon. It sounds like, what's step one? What you're basically saying.
That's all that you really need to figure out. That's what your customer development should be pointing you towards, not just problems, but also like the ones that are narrow enough to solve, that seem unique or feel unique, that you can blow out and do more with. And that's like, for example, a lot of people would have started with that security feed. We believed if we just did that, it wouldn't be that useful to people. But a lot of companies just have that right now. We don't believe that's the right wedge. That's it, right? So again, you have to figure this out. And that's why I said sequencing is more important than prioritization.
Yeah, got it, cool. Somebody just asked, what is customer development?
It's a methodology coined by Stanford and Berkeley professor Steve Blank. I got to say Berkeley because I went to Berkeley. Steve Blank, and he wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And then he wrote a book called, is it the Startup Owner's Manual? Am I right? Is that the
Something
second
like
one?
that.
Yeah. And he literally laid out how to talk to people to find their problems and then have a full framework and strategy for taking that to products that they love. Like that's the way I would define it, but all from a research standpoint, customer research first. And his mantra is like, get out of the building, things like that. And these are all things that I think I definitely grew up with. I think you were already adult by then, Dan, but like what definitely greatly influences almost everything I say, whether it's customer development or the concepts from Eric Ries and Lean Startup. That's actually at those times, those years are when Dan and I first met.
Yeah, exactly. Those were fun times back in the day. And somebody shared the link to it in the chat. Cool.
Yep,
all right.
Perfect.
A couple more questions, then we'll get to Q&A. So one thing is, you mentioned NPS a few times. I was really glad to hear you say that, what's really valuable is like the qualitative whys you get behind it, right? As I like to tell people, like, okay, you do your NPS survey and you get a 12, like good or bad. Like, if you're like a B2C company, it's probably bad. If you're a cable company, it could be amazing because everybody hates cable companies or whatever, right? So it's really those whys. Another survey question that our mutual friend Sean Ellis came up with, he called the Sean Ellis product market fit question, was about the phrase, and some of the people here may be familiar with it, how would you feel if you could no longer use product X? And the choices were very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed, or like, NA, I don't use it anymore. And just for people on the call, I know you know this already, that he's basically come with a general guideline, obviously varies by product category, of the people, 40% of people or more say very dissatisfied. That's a good indicator that you've got product market fit. So, and it kind of it's funny because it got really popular lately because Rahul from Superhuman gave a talk not too long ago about how they use that question to improve their product market fit. So I know you've known Sean from back in the day and you've used his methodology. So I'm just wondering if you could share your thoughts on how you've seen it work well, and are there any pitfalls to avoid when you're trying to use that kind of a methodology?
I think it has the same I'm a big fan, and I use it. And I think Rahul's piece is amazing and kind of nails it really well on how to create an engine. He calls it a product market fit engine, because what he augments it with is data about who the customer is. So he adds that data into it and then does segmentation to see which customer segment has the highest fit based on Sean Ellis' score. I love that. Yeah. Without those aspects of it, we were doing that, but he made it operationalized and cut down the number of questions and things like that to go for what his goal is, which is a tight engine when you have a high volume product, is what I would call it. So when if you had Calendly and you did this, you would have found all the pockets of fit. And then what I would have done is double down on each of those verticals of pockets, and then they would be a much bigger business today, much faster, if they just did that simple thing that Rahul did. So in the context of Rahul's engine, I think it really works when you have something where you can get hundreds of retained customers every month, right? Which is not every business. Right. I think it works really well in that scenario, extremely well. So that's one thing I want to say about it. In terms of the original Sean Ellis methodology, it's just like MPS. If you segment it and look at all the qualitative written in data by different people, because the other questions that are asked in the original survey are like, have you recommended this product to anyone? Yes, no. That score itself is valuable, but then you ask, how did you describe it? That gets you your homepage copy. Right. Straight up. I peeled copy out of that. So I think like there's a bunch of other questions in there. Like what's your main reason for choosing the response you gave on the first question? So it's all that, like, so I'm a geek when it comes to like filled in open-ended answers, right? Because like that's where the magic is. Once you take the segmentation and bundle that into it, you're able to see what different slices of customers, exactly what they're saying. It's like magic. So I think NPS does that for you, and Sean Ellis's fit survey does it for you extremely well. And then Rahul's is almost like very next level when it comes to really tuning in on the persona and the ICP, ironically. Right. Yeah. Back to that. Basically, because you have multiple ICPs, you have slightly different flavors of ICPs, or maybe very different ones. And to your point, the fit is going to be different for different ones. Like the market is slightly different, so the fit's going to be different. So that's right. That's good. And I that's right. And an interesting thing from Sean's stuff is he would ask people, how do you describe this product to other people? Which I think is, as you said, is a very good
insightful and helps marketing as well. So you're not talking about it in a way that doesn't make sense to people. That's cool.
Yeah, I just put the link to a Coda, very thorough Coda article with a thorough example of Rahul's product market fit engine.
Cool.
Very good.
Great. And the last kind of topic I want to touch on, we touched on this briefly, and you mentioned it, was as far as the general idea of measuring product market fit, the PMF question is an attempt to do that. It's, as I like to point out, that's attitudinal data. It's people telling you stuff. And some people prefer behavioral data, and the top behavioral way to track product market fit is retention. And I'm a big fan of looking at that. And I know you mentioned that it's a way to do it. You think it's more of a lagging indicator than some of the qual. That kind of makes sense. So just wondering what your thoughts are. The funny thing for me is that idea, as you and I were talking, that idea has been out there for a while, but I still don't see that many teams actually looking at the retention rate. So anyway, just curious about your thoughts on how to use retention rate and how people should think about it.
I love retention. I love looking at those curves and seeing like where you're at and where you need to get to. And what that really means is like, by like 90 days in, like what percentage of people are still coming back to the product, right? And retained. I just feel like I look at the graph and I'm like, it usually just frustrates me or annoys me because I look at it and I'm like, oh, we're not there yet. And then I try to figure out, okay, back to ICPs and segments, what segments are we there at? Find me some gold. Somebody find me some gold. Right. Which ones are high? Because those are the ones where I don't know if I want to double down on them, but I want to know who they are and what they're using our product for. Again, all these things, without the segmentation, they're useless to you. They're just some metric that you're trying to move up or down, that you have no context on why, right? And at least when you segment by like who, you can get context on if there are any pockets that have higher or lower, and then dig in from there. And if I found high pockets, just like with product market fit engine concept, I would double down on those, right? Or I try to figure out what makes them different or whatever it is. So same thing in my mind.
Right. And to just unpack it a little bit, because I think if people aren't looking at retention, level one is you look at the retention curve for your whole base. That's like level one. Right?
Absolutely.
And then what you're talking about is then you get more advanced and you start looking at cohorts. And it's interesting because, the first time somebody sees like 3 or 4 cohort curves, they get really excited. But once you have like 10 or more curves, they're all crisscrossing. It's super messy. You can't tell what the heck's going on. And so what Heten's talking about, I just want to clarify, is like what you start to do is you actually segment your market by some kind of segmentation attributes, and you compare the retention of those things. And that's where you see, oh my gosh, this one ICP, this one target market has a much higher retention rate than these other people. And to your point, why is that? So that level, I see even fewer people at that level of analyzing retention rates by market segment. But I agree with you that that's where you can find the pockets. And then to your point, you can decide, do we want to go there or do we not want to? But at least you know where you're getting resonance.
I think the funny thing is like the longer that we have this tech and product and software and things going on, the more you just got to turn into a scientist for all the areas where you can be, and like you just don't have a choice. And that means you're looking at data, you're running experiments, you're trying to segment it, you're getting expertise on this side. And I think and that's qualitative and quantitative. I think that's a lot of the job. But yet I know product people are bogged down by all the other parts of the job that are not as outcome driven or meaningful.
Yeah, and I'm glad you just made the point I was about to make, which is not just quant, it's qual. It's not just qual, it's quant. Like so many people have a preference for one or the other, and they lean to that muscle. It's like there are companies that are like, I like to say like Spock, they're all analytics and they don't talk to customers. There are other customers that are all, other companies are all like I call Oprah. They talk to people, but they don't have any analytics. So I think I would echo your point. Like you got to build the muscle, both muscles to do product today. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. Awesome. Well, good chatting with you. Let's switch to audience Q&A. And the way this works, if you haven't already got your question for Hiten, please put it in chat. John, our facilitator, is tracking those down, and then he's got a Google Doc that he's putting them in for me. And then the way this will work is I'll call your name out, and he'll chat you. We'll chat you who's next and say, hey, you're going to be next. And the reason we do this as a Zoom meeting instead of webinar is so that you can jump in with your video and your audio. You're welcome to come in, and I'll put you up here next to Hiten so you can have as close to a side-by-side question Q&A as we can. So let's do that. The first person here, Bency Goldman, had a question. So let me pull up Bency here. And I think you should be coming in here. There we go. Cool. Let me get myself out of here and I'll get you in here and you can, there you go. Welcome, Benty. Please go ahead and ask your question, Reed.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, Hiten, by the way, we chatted a few years ago and you look way cooler with the hair. So I think you should
Thank you. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah. Thank you for the compliment.
But so this is a long one question, so stop me if it gets too long. But basically, my question is, how do you measure your status of where you're at in terms of product market fit when you're very early as a startup in terms of like just piloting, people are starting to use it, give you initial feedback? So like, how much data do you need to decide whether you're, where you are on the sort of scale of product market fit? Like, how much data do you need to be like, is it too soon after 2 months to be like, we're not getting, mad adoption here, so we need to pivot? And then the second side of that is having in mind, if it's a new type of tool, right, like a new category, do you give yourself more time to gauge because people are still identifying with the problem or the use case of the tool, etc.? That makes sense?
Yeah. What you're looking for early on is people who are innovators in your market. They want the innovative products, and you want to find at least 5 of them. And so what you're going to have to do is have enough conversations, like let's say 30, in order to find 5 people who actually want your solution the way you're thinking about it, or the way you've built it. And the thing is that, and this is B2B in particular, it could work in B2C, but I think your numbers need to be higher. And there's some other things you can do. But in B2B, straight up, you're talking like you want the innovators. The innovators are in like the crossing the chasm curve, like the first shot. And so what you're trying to make sure of is that there are, that 10, 12, whatever percentage, or well, not 10, 12, but like 20, 30%, 30%, I guess. A third of those people that you talk to, let's say 30, just to give you some quantitative idea, they would use your product. They realize it would be early, but they have that strong need and desire to solve that core problem that you're trying to solve in the way that you're trying to solve it today. So for example, there are a lot of people that used to say to us, oh, in a product like that, we're going to need all these other tools. There's still some percentage, but a lot of people just see it. And they're like, yeah, most of my documents are in Google Workspace. I don't need Dropbox or Box or whatever the heck else I'm using. Just give me this. And then whenever you have that, cool. Right? You're looking for that person, looking for those people. You're not looking for, oh yeah, it's okay. Or, oh, it's nice. I'll use it when you have these 10 things, right? You want someone who's okay with what it is today. And they're almost like raving lunatics when it comes to, oh, I want it now. Like I need this now. Like, give it to me now, right? I don't care what else you have. I want what you have now, right? And that's where like knowing that your step 1 is going to do that to people. That's what you're trying to aim for. So there's no time on this. You don't want to give yourself a time limit, but you want to figure out where you're trying to get to. This is what you're trying to get to. And if you're not there, then I would actually stop building and go back to the drawing board and be like, what is going to get us there? So I can tell you today, our infinite scroll is going to get us there. There are some major technical things we've done that no one's done that we can tell in the market. And they're really nuanced things. But when the right customer today sees it, they're like, you were able to do that? How did you do that? We tried to do it. We couldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, it was hard, but it was the right thing to do. So we did it because you kept telling us, people like you, that we needed this to do this, right? But we heard people telling us we needed to do this, right? We heard people telling us they didn't have a way to do this. So when we heard all of that, we're like, oh, this is the thing. That's the best thing we can do. That's going to get us that effect that these innovators would come and be like, yeah, I want it now. That's it. Because like early on, yeah, you have no clue. There's no evidence. There's nothing. All you got to wait for is like somebody, enough crazy people saying, oh, that crazy thing you built that looks like a feature or whatever, I need it. And I can buy into the vision of where you want to go with it. And that's what you're looking for if it's B2B, especially if you're talking about like real B2B price points, like 10K and up a year. And if you're talking about like lower end price points, it's still the same, but you're just looking for a higher volume, way more people. Or you have metrics that it can be self-service and all that. that just give you solid leading indicators, like lots of demo requests, right? And then people hopping off the demo trying to get at you instead of you trying to get at them, things like that, right? Those are all great signs too. Those are all the leading indicators. But I don't have a timeline for you. I don't have a timeline. My timeline's yesterday.
I have a runway, you know?
Yeah, I know. I have a runway too. That's why my timeline's yesterday. I don't care how much money we raise or how much money we have. There's a runway and it's yesterday, right? So yeah, the answer is you should figure this out yesterday.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, totally.
All right, thanks for your question, Bensi. The next cool person with the question is Mark Common. Mark Common, are you there? I'm going to ask you to unmute. Cool. And then you can pop your video in there. And oops, I did the wrong one, I think. Oh, maybe. Yeah, hold on, Mark. Where you at? Let's see, Mark. There you go. Cool. I think I asked the wrong person.
All right.
Yes. You should see a little pop up. There we go. Cool. Let me pop you in here with Hiten.
Awesome.
Give me one sec. And then there we go. Cool. All right.
All right, great. Hiten, thanks for your talk tonight. Great topic. It was amazing.
Thank you.
So question, let's say you know where you want to go with your product and you hit your first step and you define your next steps and you're after you get your first step out and you start getting some feedback from your customers, the feedback you get maybe conflicts with where you thought you were going to go next on your next steps. So, and maybe even some of the feedback you got from customers conflicts with, each other. So how do you manage through that to make sure that you feel confident that as you're progressing to the next steps of your product, that you're on path with what you're looking to accomplish and getting the best product market fit?
Yeah, next steps have to be organic. I don't think next steps are like, oh, I know step one and I know step two. I think it's more like I know step one and then I have optionality. And if we have good data on customers, like previously, then we've just got a list of things. So it's almost like this is step one and there's these lists of things. And all of those things, whatever we do next, takes us on a different path. So what you're doing is as you build it and then get people on it, you're trying to figure out what's that next thing we need to do, right? And usually, sadly, it's like 2 or 3 that make sense, even when you start talking to customers and hearing them. Like for us, it was like, do we add actions or do we go build a security feed? Because they both solve different problems, right? One problem is, oh my God, you're showing me everything, yay. Oh my God, you're showing me everything, oh no. It's like the same reaction at the same time. Right. So then you're like, wait, we should make it easier for them to find things. The easiest way is give them a feed, so we're just finding it for them, right? But if they can't take action on it, does it even matter to find something? So that was the kind of thing we had to do, because it's also not always that clear, but like that's the kind of thing we had to do. And then it was just like, well, what's serving the customer the fastest? So if we were able to build a feed faster, then we would have done that first before we build the actions in. But in our case, until we build the actions in, we didn't even know what exactly mattered in the feed. Because if we show them something, they don't really care to take action on it too much. It's like a relatively low risk item. It doesn't matter. So we use the time we had with what we call the visibility product to basically go figure out what do they care about? What do they see here that they can't see any other way? And then what do they want to do with it? And that's where we figured out the actions we need to start with, because there's like 20, 30 more actions we could take on people's behalfs, right? And help them do. Yeah. But like we had to pick the right one. So it's that process. You don't want to, I wouldn't get stuck on step 2 and later. I would just say this is all optionality. And then it's the sequencing. And again, I go back to, that's why the prioritization doesn't matter. The sequencing matters. And you're not going to know until you start hearing people and hear their crap or whatever it is about what you're doing. There's probably a pile of bugs you need to fix, all kinds of things that are broken, because that always happens. And then all these little things you learn too, where you're like, wait, if we like in a lot of areas in the product, we've iterated like 50 times because we heard these little things like, oh, this doesn't work well, or this is not connected and this view doesn't exist. How come when I click here, it doesn't go anywhere? It's like you hear those kind of things, and really like you actually want to prioritize those first, because that creates that delightful experience. And everyone early is like, oh crap, they're building fast. Mm-hmm. Whatever your steps are next are usually going to be slow builds, not fast builds, right? Right. Like what I mean is like days, weeks, not hours or days. In my timeline, we don't move in quarters or months here. So
that's great. Thank you so much.
Good question.
Thanks, Mark, for your question. Next up, we have Prasad Chalasani. Prasad, you there? All right, cool. Let me get you on here. One sec. All right, and go for it.
Hey, Hiten. Hey, thanks for the very entertaining and engaging presentation. So one of the things that I notice just introspecting myself and my team is that, okay, so we presented something to our first customer, an initial version of a product. And then before the next call with that same customer, I see that we tend to delay that and add on a lot of features to kind of really wow them, for the next meeting. Is that a good tendency, or should we be going very incremental?
We go very incremental, and then
So have a meeting as frequently as.
Yeah, if we can, and we also make the big wows like really meaningful.
Okay.
So actions was a big wow for us, but
right.
Tweaking like the funny thing is, like, in a lot of places in the interface, we were showing people's names, but we weren't showing the damn email address.
Okay.
And in this kind of product, one person can have like 5 email addresses, and that's a problem you want to solve. Like, you want to fix that, change it, you want to learn about it, right? And so we weren't showing the emails. So it would say my co-founder's name, Marie Prokopets, 5 times with
right.
no idea except a little avatar, which you can't even tell. And it didn't have the email. But that's a small win.
Right. Okay.
Why wouldn't we go ship that small win as fast as we can? Because it's a win. It's just a win, right? And then the actions thing is like a major project that takes, like, I don't want to say months, but like it probably took us a few months, and it's still not like amazing the way I want it to be, right? So
sometimes you worry that, hey, if you just call them like in a few days and have another call, is that too much? Or should we
I wouldn't necessarily make all these things about calling them. I'd even
just ship it to them.
I'd just ship it, as long as you're not like dealing with super finicky changes. Like, finicky meaning someone's going to get pissed because they're trying to do something and you really messed it up or changed it on them. And that's what I mean, not messed it up, but changed it. Then these things are quick wins. And if you've heard it from 1 or 2 people or 3 people or whatever, like, just go ship it. Like, you don't need to get on a call with them about a little feature like that, right?
But how do you know they love it or don't like it?
They already told you they need it.
Okay.
You were listening as they were showing you their usage of the product. You were just listening. Like, we just listened. We just heard, oh, why can't I click this?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Why can't you? What did you expect? Where did you want it to go? Right. Or hey, like, and sometimes it's not even like them telling you. No one told us add the emails. We just started looking at it and we're like, And then they were struggling to click around and trying to get back to something, like, what's the email? And we're like, oh, I mean, we were literally on a demo call with like a group of admins, and one of them was like a customer of our product. And like, we shipped something hours before that. And he's like demoing the product to like a bunch of his not colleagues, but like his counterparts in other companies. Yep. And he's like, oh, you folks added that? Like, it's there now? I'm like, yeah, we shipped it. It's there. Like, and again, that's just because we have a mantra of just ship it. Like, just ship it. Like, if it's small, just ship it, get it done, like, move on, right? Because the big things always take time. And so it's almost like if you're trying to save all the wow factor for the big things or put a whole pile of things into one, nobody remembers anything. Do you think they would remember that little email thing we did if it was in a pile of like 5 or 6 things?
I see. So do small delights over time. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and the big ones.
Eventually, big ones. Yeah. I mean, awesome. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have one last question here, Piam, if you're there. That's fine. Yeah.
Yes.
If you want to, great. And you can turn on, you should be able to see a little thing to put your video on. Give me 1 sec here. Remove. All right, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey.
Thank you. Hey, Hiten. Thanks. I think we discussed product market fit before an email. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like you mentioned, willingness of customers to pay is an important factor. What do you think? Like if some products start with free tier or free trial, or some consumer facing product that's more like using a free version first, like how do you consider that in figure out like ideal customer profile and product market fit? Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. I think that like you have like only 2 or 3 different options. So one option is you create a free plan because one reason, I don't think it's the best reason, but you create a free plan because you think it's going to help you get higher velocity of interactions with customers. whether it's because they signed up and they drop off, or they sign up and they start using it. So what I'm trying to do is figure out fastest path to the customer using the product. And that has to be balanced with, are they going to pay us? Or how close to them paying us are we getting here? So that's why I hesitate a lot here, because for Nira, we made a very deliberate choice that we're going to start with like a higher barrier to entry of getting people in the product. Now there's like 6 reasons we decided to do that. And the main one though was we want to build for a high paying customer. And then we will consciously bring that feature set, tweaking, packaging down to the smallest customers we can possibly find that need our solution or a version of it. And that's the way we're thinking about it. So I don't have a clear cut, this is the answer every time. I'm just looking for fastest path to the customer, using the product and getting the right feedback. At the same time, balancing that with who do we really not care about, but who do we know if we don't serve that we don't have a business? In our case, if we don't serve the mid-market and up, so like 300, 500 employees and higher, we don't have a business. We just know that. So we got to start there and nail that and feel good about it. For example, like it was a hard decision to decide, oh, we need to go spend some time to scale this backend to hit tens and tens of millions of documents in our interface and still be this fast. And that was a decision early on when we had landed a customer in a POC that was really large at that time and was like, hey, I want to use it. Do we go say no? Or do we go make it happen? And we decided, because our goal was mid-market and higher, to serve them and make sure that we understand what they need, even if we're not ready yet, and that they will pay. We couldn't do anything else but that. And so when someone large enough came, that was like we were grateful. We were like, okay, now we can talk to our head of engineering and say, hey, we got this here. We do want to serve it now. And now means as fast as possible. Can we make that happen? And what's the timeline look like? Because if we didn't have that, then we probably wouldn't be where we are today, because we wouldn't be able to get any customer to come in and say, hey, what's up? Like, I can use it no matter what size they are. And that's where we're at now. I really don't care what size they are. If they use Google Workspace, we can service them. And that was the biggest goal that we wanted to have. And then we plan on having a startup plan and a free plan eventually and all those kinds of things, but those can come later, because also the need we're solving is universal across even the smallest companies from what we've seen.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope that helps.
Cool. It looks like we have one last question here from Farid. Let me ask him to unmute and put his camera on. There we go.
Hey.
All right, welcome. Go for it.
Hey, thanks again. Great insights, a lot of notes. I mean, I'm going to need another tool to go through these notes, I think, from this meeting myself. But the question I had, and I guess, I acknowledge that it might even be a different game to what, the game you're playing and talking about, which is a purely online product where, for example, in, Nira, you're relying on a set of data that exists elsewhere, and you're basically tapping into that data and sort of like trying to solve a problem as a result of, that data. When you're dealing with a product where the data doesn't exist, and that's actually the value proposition for you to mine the data, specifically in an offline setting where you're dealing with people on the ground doing physical work. How would you try and find that hook or find that sort of wedge? Is it in the collection of the data and then and then the rest sort of results from that, or because it's they're all interesting problems to solve and they're all hard. Yeah, just wanted to see your opinion, and I acknowledge that it might not be in exactly the same game, but
it's the same game. So you have to abstract what we did to a higher level. So what we did is find problem, solve problem. Like, that's all we did. We were just sure about the problem, and we have very good discernment about which problems are worth solving. So in an offline context, you can do the same thing. So it's not about an interface, even for us. It's about an experience. And it's about, can we make that experience 10x better than what exists in the market today? So if you just abstract it to that level, and then you think about the experience that you need to create, or the existing experience customers have, and then the one you need to create, and how it can be 10x better and whether you can even make it 10x better, I think those are the kind of questions I'd be asking. And then I'd figure out what your equivalents are, right? And I wouldn't even think of it as equivalents. It's not, it's truly apples to apples. There's no difference, but we abstract it up and think about experience and problems. And so these problems have to be so painful, and the experience we have has to be so great that it solves that problem better than anything else out there. And so again, that's high level. If you want to go lower level, just tell me what you're dealing with or what the struggle is, and I'm happy to dive in even deeper.
Yeah, it's probably out of the scope for this talk, but I mean, just a quick follow-up question on what you said. So, I mean, when you do that, you have different personas. So the experience is for a different persona. In your case, IT managers, for example, is a persona you're building. Whereas, for example, in our case specifically, there's multiple personas to actually consider. And the experience for the manager or the person using the online tool relies heavily on the experience for the person on the ground who collects the data, right? So there's actually that's sort of like how I was thinking about approaching it.
We have three personas. We have a CIO, we have a mid-level manager, whatever that means in the company, and then we have an admin who's actually in the tools. So sometimes the CIO will get in the tools. All the time, no. Most of the time, no. This person rarely gets in the tools. They're just chicken without a head, chicken with the head cut off, running around trying to manage all these people, trying to do all these things like command line tooling, scripting, using the tools. So we actually have 3 ICPs if you really want to dig in and narrow it down, right? The product I demo is for that third one. The use cases I share is kind of for the second one. And then the higher level, which I don't talk about because we're not revealing it yet, is for the CIO. So the CIO gets not a different message, but it's like, hey, high level, this, and I describe it literally like this. I'm not gonna say what it is, but I describe it like this. That's what we do. And that's what we bring to the CIO, right? But the demo is still the same for them. It's just at the end, we're just very specific about, well, this is the vision. Because the CIO has to buy in the vision, make the business case, buy into the business strategy, right? Not ours, theirs, right? And they're looking for like digital transformation, ways to like do this and that and another layer. So you're just talking about layers of abstraction in our business. If your business is like a marketplace and you have a buyer and seller, it's not layers of abstraction. It's literally one party influences the other party in a very direct way, right? And so what you have is 2 ICPs too, and you're just trying to figure out where does the experience and what you're trying to create kind of work across them, right? So we have the same problem is what I'm saying. It's not any different. It's just nuance, right? And our solution is digital fully, but if you have an offline solution, it's still, to me, I don't think any of these things are any different. I just think that they're just a matter of thinking of it like and understanding the other side too and saying, oh, that other side is exactly the same as my side. It's not any easier or harder. It's really hard to make CIOs, the middle managers and the admins happy. Really, really hard, because they all have different mindsets about this whole same problem. And sometimes you can get cut off because the CIO or whoever wants some other random tool that the admin is like, hell no. And that happens. So then what do you do? Right. And then you get in all the sales strategies and all that good stuff, or, going to that boss or whatever you got to do. But like, those are the kinds of things that kind of we deal with as well, which are kind of complicated too.
Just try and meet them, where they are on their own journey. And basically, yeah, that makes sense.
What else are you going to do?
I mean, I've got tons of questions, but I'll probably annoy you on email or Twitter.
That's fine.
Thanks
Sounds
again.
Good. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for your question. Thanks, Hiten, for a great Q&A and a great talk. Really appreciate it.